Welcome to Goddess on the Rise. I am your host, Sarah Brookberg, board certified life coach, board certified holistic health coach, and Ayurveda practitioner. Goddess on the Rise is all about empowering women, self love, wellness, reclaiming the body you are in, and creating a life where you can come out on top. So, buckle up, girlfriend. We are going for a ride. Oh my gosh. Hello. Hi. It has been literally so long since I have come on here and done a podcast episode with you. If you are not watching this on YouTube, just know that there is video footage, like actual video footage of me on the YouTube recording this podcast so you can like watch me in real time. But anyways, wow, welcome back. I think the last time I had recorded, I was getting ready to have my hysterectomy, and now I am like 11 weeks. Am I 11 weeks post-op? Hold on, let's see. Yes, we are talking 11 weeks post-op from my hysterectomy. And I have been wanting to record an episode for so long, like talking about this process and like what it looked like. But if I'm being honest, I feel like it's just like one of those things that is super hard. It was very difficult for me to talk about, right? Because my journey is obviously so different than so many women's. I do not have any children of my own. So like getting on here is like I knew I needed to like heal a little bit first before I came on here because I didn't want this to be like a trauma dumping session. I wanted it to be very much like educational, right? Now, you guys know, like, I am real, raw, unfiltered as fuck on this, like, podcast, right? We've been here together since 2019. I have been recording episodes since 2019. I think that's absolutely crazy, but it also makes me very, very happy to be here. Podcasting has been like such, you guys know the drill. When I start You guys know the drill. When I start recording episodes, I yawn, and I think it's because I'm just like releasing energy. It's a whole thing. But anyways, you just caught it on camera because this is like the first time I'm recording it like live, right? So anyways, you guys know the drill. My podcast has been very raw and unfiltered. I've shared the good, I've shared the bad, I've shared the ugly with you all. And I feel like it's very much become more of like a lifestyle podcast. But also like with a little bit of like a takeaway at the end, right? Like there's always something that you can take from every episode, even the episodes where I'm just like gabbing and being like, hey, this is what's going on in my life, right? I feel like there's always like a lesson that comes out, and I kind of love it. Okay, so I don't know where I left off, but I decided that I'm going to record this on TikTok. So we got TikTok here too. Hello, friends from TikTok joining. Okay, so we're doing a live podcast. Recording on the TikTok. Okay, so back to what I was talking about was that I am 11 weeks post-op from my hysterectomy, and it was actually really crazy because as someone who is like very much so open and so like honest and very like I don't know, I would say like real raw, authentic as fuck is what I talk about on my podcast, but like even just like in life in general, still sharing about like my hysterectomy and like my journey, it felt so raw. And I feel like I really needed some time to like really heal from that and kind of really go through that before I could share it out loud because it just felt so like it was like such a wound that was open and I didn't know like what to do with that. With me like recording this on TikTok, I'm like trying to manage them both. So, um, we're moving things around, we're getting it all situated. But I felt like I really needed some time to like go through and heal and grieve and not let it be so like online, right? Like I needed time to do that. Okay, so I really just needed time to like process, right? So, with that being said, I finally feel like I have healed enough to like come on here and talk about this. And what I really wanted to do was talk about the whole journey, what led me to get a hysterectomy, what led me to like even think about that. And I know I've shared a little bit on here about like what that process really looked like. It had been so long since I feel like I'd shared it like from start to finish, right? So as we're going through this, I'm just going to say like a trigger warning. I am going to be talking about infertility. I'm going to be talking about miscarriages, and just like overall health things. And what I'm going to do is share my story. Now, my story is not going to be your story. Your story is not going to be my story, right? And just because like I have these symptoms or I have these symptoms and all this stuff going on doesn't mean that your journey is going to look exactly the same. So I don't recommend you diagnosing yourself or anything like that. I definitely recommend going to a medical professional or even citing into my DMs and asking me questions if you want. And we'll kind of go from there. And then also, I want to like remind, uh, oh, someone said, what is this live about? Hi, hello, hello, hello. So I am doing a live podcast recording. So we're going over basically my I'm 11 weeks post-op from a hysterectomy. And so I'm sharing with my community like kind of what that looked like and the reason why I kind of like share this stuff so openly and out loud, and even for those like watching the podcast back, I've had so many women come up to me or even in my inbox and say, like, because of you sharing your symptoms, sharing that, hey, this isn't normal, I was able to go and get answers as well. So, um, yeah, that's kind of why I'm sharing this as well. Maybe this will help inspire you to kind of like explore your own side effects, symptoms, anything that you're experiencing, and get the help that you need. Don't take no for an answer. And then really just being like an advocate for yourself, right? And this is one of the biggest things that I tell my clients, I tell people all the time is that when you are going through medical stuff, when you're going to the doctors, I think we forget that the doctor is providing a service, right? So, like, you're paying for that service. And oftentimes, what I notice is like they'll go there and they're like, okay, this is like the only one who has like the authority to tell me exactly what to do. Like, we can't question it. And like, that is so far from the truth. So, anyways, all right. So, moving into like the major point of like this topic, right? Of like why I'm sharing this. So, this literally all started when I would say I was like super young when I was starting to have like period issues and things like that. And it was very intense, right? And I had always like struggled with my period. I had a lot of like cramping, like heavy bleeding, all that kind of stuff. And it just got worse as I got older. I ended up with Graves' disease, which is like an autoimmune disorder of the thyroid. And then from there, I ended up switching to the other side of that, which was Hashimoto's disease. And so from there, I feel like things have always just been kind of crazy, but I didn't really know like what was going on with my periods or my body or anything like that until about 2017. And what was crazy is I actually just found my pictures. So in 2017, I was going to the doctor for like pelvic pain. It was bad. It was intense. I had a 10-year Paragarden and they referred me out to a gynecologist. I was just going to like my primary care doc. And from there, she was like, okay, honestly, like your ultrasound's coming back abnormal. And at that time, I didn't know what abnormal meant. Um, I was a nurse, but I was only in pediatrics. So I didn't know too much about like OBGYN type of care. So I went and had a laparoscopic procedure done, and it's basically an exploratory procedure where they fill your abdomen up with gas and they look around like your uterus, your fallopian tubes, all that kind of stuff, and see what's going on there. And when they did that, they found out that I had endometriosis. And endometriosis is one of the top 10 most painful diseases. And so that's what they were like, okay, you have endometriosis. Now we know. They removed my Paragard because it was also embedded in my uterus. So pretty crazy things. And from there, I didn't really know what to do. There was no like follow up on my care, anything like that. Of course, my husband is in the military, so I feel like there's always this back and forth of like getting missed care or like moving all the time and having to start over again. So from there, we had moved to Whidbey Island, Washington, where we're actually out now. We came back here. But we moved here and I also started working with an OBGYN group and I was a nurse there and I was dealing with a lot of issues. I had went through my very first miscarriage and then started care there and very quickly was diagnosed with PCOS. And at the time all of this was happening, I was also dealing with like super bad thyroid issues. At one point, my TSH was like 95, and it's supposed to be between 1 and 4. So it was very, very like an intense time, dealing with like very irregular periods, very heavy bleeding, all this kind of stuff. So, definitely no stranger to the struggles when it comes to gynecological issues, right? And so eventually I ended up having another miscarriage. And at that time, we did an ultrasound and sure enough diagnosed with PCOS. I had like the perfect chain of pearls is what it looks like around my ovaries. And I was like, wow, it was so intense to see. So when you are diagnosed with PCOS, usually there has to be a couple things that come online or like one or the other, right? So you'll see the chain of cyst around your ovaries on ultrasound. Another way to get diagnosed is by checking different things like your blood sugars, your A1C, that kind of stuff, and insulin resistance. So then with endometriosis, technically the only way to diagnose endometriosis is through laparoscopic surgery, which is what I had in 2017. And that's when we found endometriosis basically wrapped around everything. It was wrapped around my bowels, my uterus, my fallopian tubes. And what's really interesting about endometriosis is it is a full body disease. So it doesn't just affect your reproductive organs, it affects your whole body. Endometriosis has been found in the thoracic cavity, it's been found in the brain, the lungs, all literally all over the body, and it is very, very, very painful. So, with that being said, again, I didn't do much management for that because I was just kind of managing it holistically for the most part. And then comes September 2020 when I again had another miscarriage. This was my third one at this point, and it hit me pretty hard. Pause for a little coffee break. If you're watching on TikTok and like you have any questions, feel free to like jot them down. Also, if you're listening to this podcast like on YouTube or on Spotify, Apple, whatever, definitely leave me a review if you could. And I will be getting to questions that were sent in at the end. I asked on social media, and a lot of people came up with some questions that they were wanting to know, like what's going on. And so I wrote those down. We'll be answering them at the end. Okay, so back to what I was saying in September 2020, I had my third miscarriage. And at this point, we were in Fallon, Nevada, which is like a very rural area. And I knew from working in OBGYN for so long at that point, I think I had been there for about 4 years at this point, that I was like, okay, I know I need to go to the emergency room. I just want to make sure that I've passed everything. So I wanted to see if I could get an ultrasound done, because I didn't have primary care set up. And this was like in the middle of COVID, right? Like pretty much at the very beginning of it where people were just kind of like learning more about it, right? Because it started in March 2020 and this was like in September 2020. So, anyways, went to the emergency room. They completely ignored me, and my symptoms and my pain and everything like that. And they were just like, yeah, there's nothing we can do for you. Your HCG is going down, so get over it, basically. I followed up with primary care, or actually, I followed up with a gynecologist. And this was because I was still having extremely heavy bleeding, and I've been bleeding for like a month at this point, nonstop, every single day. And it was pretty intense. It was pretty crazy. I remember being like very frustrated about like what was going on and how I was feeling. And then I went to the gynecologist, and basically she told me that um, there's nothing she could do for me unless I wanted birth control because the reason why I'm bleeding is because of my fluffy tummy. And if there's anything that we know about gynecological issues is that correlation does not equal causation. So like my fluffy tummy could correlate with heavy bleeding. I still don't think so because when I was doing more research about this, like there was no actual medical journals that talked about that or like, peer-reviewed articles. So free to interpretation there, but also my fluffy tummy wouldn't cause that, right? So a couple things there that I was like, okay, super red flag. She was just so unwilling to help me. I kept bleeding, kept bleeding, kept bleeding, and I also was going through a lot of like thyroid issues at this time too. And the bleeding basically continued for years. And during this time, I was going to another like OBGYN in Reno, which is like an hour and a half drive. And basically she was like, at first she was really good. She was like, okay, let's see if we can get an ultrasound, find out what's going on. We got an ultrasound and she's like, okay, this is like pretty dangerous. Like your endometrium is like very thick. This is not okay. Like, what's going on? She's like, I would love to do a DNC. She's like, and here are your options. You can do a DNC, you can do an ablation, or you could be on birth control. And I didn't really know like what to do with this information. I was just like, wow, this is a little much and I don't know what to do. So I've kind of like thought it over for a long time and I was like, okay, well, we've increased my thyroid medication. My thyroid is like kind of leveling out. And I was like contemplating a DNC. Oh my gosh, my husband just joined. Hi, hubby. What are you doing? That's so funny. I'm actually gonna pause it. Okay, so if you were on TikTok watching that, you're gonna have to comment because my husband just came on TikTok live and watched or like came on like as a guest and we got to chat on TikTok live, which I think is so funny. Okay, so anyways, back to what I was talking about. Um, we kind of went back and forth of like what to do with the bleeding that was happening. Like nothing was working, nothing was making sense. And the only option she ever gave me was literally like a DNC, an ablation, or birth control. An ablation would mean that I would never ever be able to get pregnant. And if I did get pregnant, I would have to go through an abortion because it would be so dangerous. Like the possibility of carrying a baby to full term after an ablation is very, very slim, very dangerous to baby, very dangerous to mom. So I was like, okay, I don't think I want to go through this. Like, I don't think I want to do this at all. The ablation, anyways. And so eventually I was like just so frustrated with my options. I told her, I was like, okay, well, she did tell me, she said that there was this one medication she could give me, and it was not birth control. And I could try it and see if it would slow down the bleeding. And if not, then I would need to go to the hospital and get a DNC. So I tried it. And when I got it, I was on vacation in Iowa to my family's house, and we went and picked up the medication, and I was like, are you shitting me? It was birth control. And I was so frustrated because I had discussed with her over and over and over again, like, I don't want to be on birth control. I don't like the way it makes me feel. I've been on birth control before. And if I'm being honest, it caused a lot of like suicidal ideation. It made me feel crazy. Like I just lost it, right? And it made me so upset that as a provider, she decided to completely like ignore my requests, my boundaries, and see if she could just like slide it in, you know? I'm like, wow, that's like really, I thought that that was so crazy that someone would do that. You know what I'm saying? So I got very upset about that. But I did try to take the progesterone and see if it would help me at all. And it didn't actually. I just kept bleeding through it. So um I did everything at this point. I started trying everything. Things like herbs. I was messing around with some pretty intense herbs, trying to see if that could stop the bleeding. I was talking with my friend who is an herbalist, and we created some more blends. And I just literally was doing everything I possibly could at this point to just stop the bleeding because it had been going on for about 3 years, pretty much nonstop. I was super anemic. And then I kept going back to my OBGYN to see, like, okay, is there anything else we can do? And eventually she just stopped returning my phone calls and didn't book me anymore. And I was like, that's just super frustrating. So I waited until I got here into Washington. And I got in with the original OBGYN group that I had been with. And I told her, like, hey, this is what's going on. Or actually, I missed a step. Okay. So my husband deployed, and I went and stayed with my sister down in or up in North Dakota. And at this time, I set up OBGYN care there because again, my bleeding became absolutely ridiculous. As I'm going through all of this, the only thing I could ever wear was actually period boxer underwear. It was insane. And I had to be like really careful. Like if I bend a certain way, I would just quite literally bleed out. It was the worst thing ever. And so after we left Nevada, we had traveled for like months. It was ridiculous. We left in June, and then June, July, and August, we were traveling the whole time. So we went from Nevada to Iowa, Iowa to San Diego, San Diego to Whidbey Island, and then I went from Whidbey Island to North Dakota. So it was just a big months of transition. And then of course my husband deployed during this time. I also lost my dad during this time. I lost my dog during this time, found out my mom had cancer during this time, and then eventually I set up care with another OBGYN, and from there we were actually able to get some really amazing answers. So she had offered me something called a hysteroscopy. And basically what a hysteroscopy is it's an exploratory surgery where they go into my uterus and then they like kind of look around and see like what is going on here, right? At that time, my ultrasound showed how thickened my lining was and how bad it was. For me to be bleeding so much and having such a thickened lining, it was actually like I was very scared at this point. I was like, okay, do I have cancer or something, you know? And even my provider was like, this is something that we're really gonna like look at because this isn't making sense, right? So when we did the hysteroscopy, we found out that the tissue in my uterus was I got diagnosed with adenomyosis. And adenomyosis is unfortunately uncurable unless you remove the uterus. So there is no curing adenomyosis. And I did have adenomyosis tissue inside my uterus. And basically what it means is that like the uterine muscle starts or the uterine lining starts growing into the uterine muscle. And they say like that it's not painful, but it just causes extremely heavy bleeding, clotting, and all that kind of stuff. Um, to me, I don't know if it was the adenomyosis that was painful or if it was just the endometriosis. So from there, when she did the hysteroscopy, she also did a DNC for me, and I saw some relief for a couple months, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was so frustrated at this point because I was like, if I had only gotten that in Nevada, maybe I would have felt better, right? We also discussed doing possible iron transfusions at this time because my iron was completely tanked. I was completely exhausted. Like walking around would just leave me in just so much pain and so much like shortness of breath. My quality of life had diminished so bad. And like the more and more I look back on it, I was like, wow, I'm shocked that I was honestly like still standing and like moving through all of this, like still living because I was very, 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 very sick. And I don't even think that I registered like how sick I was. Then going through everything that I had been through, I was just like looking back, I just want to hug that girl because I know she needed it. Ooh, does she need it so, so bad. So anyways, after going through all of that, I was just like, I don't know what I need to do here. I don't know what this is going to look like. And so I actually started working with an endometriosis dietitian. She helped me kind of like manage some of my gut stuff that was also going on at this time. And also during this time, at one point, I went back to work with another dietitian, and she basically told me like, hey, I don't really deal with gynecological stuff. You need to also fix your trauma before you come back and see me. And I was like, oh. So I invested a whole bunch of money into coaching, hired a coach myself, and really like dived deep and, dealt with some of, like past things that were coming up that were like weighing heavy on me, that were so hard to like push through, right? Like some of like the deepest, darkest things that like you carry, and I brought that up and I put it to a head. I got it out of my body. I digested those emotions, right? And so with all that, I started working with this other dietitian. She has been great. She's helped me so much. And from there, I just was like, okay, I need to make some decisions, right? Like, am I ever going to be able to get pregnant? Am I ever going to figure out like what's going on? And then during this time, I finally made it back to Washington and I scheduled with my um, original OBGYN doctor here who diagnosed me with PCOS. And I had originally went in as like a consult of like what it was that I could do to stop bleeding and also like possibly a hysterectomy consult. And while I was waiting for this appointment, I ended up started bleeding even heavier and it got so bad that I had to basically come in even quicker. I took all these medications that she recommended. So I was taking progesterone like every 2 hours to stop the bleeding. That didn't work. And then I had to try this other medication. It was like a triminus something acid, and that didn't work either. And so at this point, she was like, listen, you need to come in immediately. So they hurried up and got me in. And when I walked into the appointment, she was like, okay, give it to me. Like, are you trying to preserve your fertility? And I was like, I don't think I am. I think I have come to the decision that I still get a little emotional. But I was like, I think I have come to like not only the decision that it's time, but also like I need something for my quality of health. Like I knew that at this point that my quality of life just sucked so bad. And I was like, there has to be something. It's like something has to give. And she's like, I think the only way that we can stop this, like after everything that you have been through the last 3 years, like you are losing so much blood that like you're about to need transfusions like every couple of days of iron. And I was like, okay. She's like, we can try the Mirena IUD, but you don't do good with hormones. She already knew that. And then she's like, that doesn't necessarily mean that the bleeding will stop. So we've tried everything at this point. I think it's time that we take your uterus. And I was like, okay, like, let's do this. I had already talked to my husband about it. And I was like, not that I needed his permission, but like just letting him know, like, how are you feeling about this? Right? Like, are you going to be okay if this means no kids, right? And we talked things out and we both knew like something had to give for like my quality of life because I just was so miserable, so miserable all the time. Like I couldn't do the things that I used to be able to do. I would just felt so inflamed, so puffy, so gross all the time. And I would barely be able to walk because I would need to be close to a bathroom. And like walking was painful. I just was so crampy. I had lower back pain. I could go into so many details, but they're just so graphic. So I'll spare you those. I'll spare you those. But I literally was like, okay, I think it's time. And she's like, okay, I knew you were gonna say that, so I actually already scheduled your hysterectomy. So I went in on a Monday, and then the following week, I had my hysterectomy. Um, before I had my hysterectomy, I had an iron transfusion, and then after I had my hysterectomy, I had another iron transfusion. And it's been 11 weeks on Monday, and I my iron is still like slowly coming up. It's like struggling so hard. And I think just after being anemic for so long, for 3 years, that is taking some time. But I will tell you, it's insane what has happened since then. Like my quality of life is 100% better. I can walk, I can hike, I can do all these things. And then I have no lower back pain anymore, and now I have no more periods, which is great, right? So like that's kind of like the journey to get here. Now, let me tell you, the grieving that takes place like after you have something like this, after number one, you lose an organ is absolutely insane. Number two, after you basically have to grieve a life that you're never gonna have, right? Like you're never gonna have kids yourself. And then just like dealing with like the thoughts of like actually losing such like a feminine organ was insane. I never ever ever thought that that would be like such a thing for me. But it is, and it was so intense and it was so crazy. And like the first, I would say 3 weeks, I felt like a crazy person, right? And basically what happens is like when they take out your uterus, they and your fallopian tubes, it stops the blood flow on one side of your ovaries. So when that happens, sometimes it can take a while to like wake up, and basically that means you're in menopause. So like I go through this surgery, right? I'm experiencing all these emotions, and then I'm basically in menopause, and we're still waiting even like for this to like level out. It takes a long time. Um, so I could be in menopause still. We don't know. So wild. It's so wild at 30 years old that this is like a thing. And I think it's like something that not a lot of people talk about, right? And I don't recommend this for people. I recommend always like going through and figuring out what it is that causes this, like what is going on, right? I don't think that hysterectomy is ever, ever, ever the first line of defense. But I share this because this is like the story of like a military spouse, number one. You're moving all over the place all the time. You can't get medical care the way other people can. Um, then this is like what happens when the medical system fails you, and instead of focusing on the quality of care, the quality of your life, they're focusing on your weight. And that did me obviously no justice. And saying things like you just need to lose weight is so insensitive for sure, for one, but two, like it doesn't even make sense, right? When your body is in chronic like flight or fight, chronic inflamed, things aren't functioning properly, which is what we're seeing, right? We're seeing like I'm bleeding and I'm not stopping. My thyroid levels are through the roof, right? So instead of saying something that's like, hey, lose weight, which is not going to happen if we know anything about the body, right? That does not work out. Like your body has to be in a safe state. You have to feel some sort of like overall health to even remotely lose weight. Or sometimes if you lose weight, it's more like of a stress response in the body. I don't have that stress response. Like when I'm stressed, it holds on to everything, right? All the inflammation, all the everything. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I took a little break because I was like, I need to process this for a second. Even just like talking about this is a lot. But anyways, I can't remember exactly where I had left off, but so forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But basically, after my surgery, lots of grieving happened. And it was just honestly insane. It was a lot that came up. And I feel like it slowly lessened. Like the little pings don't get me out and down so bad. And I'm finally feeling like I'm a little bit more regulating and I'm feeling inflammation going down and my iron levels are slowly creeping back up. But most of all, it's the quality of life that did it for me. And I think the dietitian that I'm working with, I think she was a little like kind of like disappointed, like, ah, man, I feel like I could have helped her through this, but I got to the point where the bleeding was literally so bad that I couldn't anymore. Like my quality of life, it meant something. Like I just the constant struggle, like getting up and down like off the floor. I would literally have to run to the bathroom because I would just bleed out so bad. I didn't want to deal with that anymore. The pain became unbearable. So, also when they did the surgery, they had removed a whole bunch of endometriosis. There was a lot of microscopic endometriosis as well. She said that she tried to get as much as she could, but there is still hands down endometriosis there. And endometriosis does not stop with a hysterectomy. You still have it. The only thing that really did stop for me was the adenomyosis, which was the heavy bleeding. And I think with in doing this, I've talked about my quality of life coming back, but like even the pain has been so much more bearable than before. And so the reason why I share all this isn't to be like you should get a hysterectomy, but more so that if I would have been treated right in the first place, we probably would have been able to, deal with a lot of this. We would have been able to figure a lot of this out, and I wouldn't have been so miserable for years, right? Um, it's just part of it. It's just part of it. And I feel like there was even like some grief that had to go with that and a lot of like forgiveness to myself for not pushing harder, right? And not saying like not backing down and saying like, no, you are going to treat me, right? Like I wish I would have been a little bit more like, what's the word I'm looking for? I wish I would have pushed harder for myself. I wish I would have been more of an advocate for myself. And so hindsight is 2020, but maybe in sharing this with you, this will lead you to start exploring answers. And that is the least I hope comes out of this. I hope that, you know, there you can have some hope. I hope that you can ask your doctor more questions. I hope you can just advocate for yourself and stop waiting to get seen if you're going through something similar. And just know like my inbox is open and I do one-on-one health consults with my clients all the time. And what that looks like too, even is really incredible to me. I wish I would have had this when I was going through this. And it is a consult where we dive deep into your health history, like what's going on with your digestion, what's going on with your reproductive system, what's going on like on I'm not even gonna cut that out because it's very much so like yawning is like me processing. So anyways, but going on like full body scale, right? And then from there I create a plan, a guide for you, if you will, that's going to go over like lifestyle, nutrition, supplementation, all these things. But then it's also going to tell you like questions that you can ask your doctor. Um I can hold your hand through these appointments, like, one-on-one. I can, be there for you, make sense of your labs. I can help you ask for certain labs if you don't know what to ask for. So these are all ways that I can help you on your journey. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Now I'm going to go over like some of the questions that came into my inbox. So let me pause this and pull it up. So one of the questions I did get asked, which I thought was the sweetest thing, was if I'm okay, how am I truly doing? And that meant the world to me. So thank you to whoever asked that. I am doing okay. It's funny because I put up this question box probably like 4 weeks ago, and I just have not gotten around to it because I was having such a hard time. Like I kept wanting to sit down and record this, and then I was like, no, the timing's not right. It's not right yet. And so it took me a while to like come on here and talk about these things. I look back and I was like, man, I really wish I would have like vlogged this more, and shared this more. But what I have realized is that this wasn't content. This wasn't something that I went through to become famous or to grow a following or to even share with other people. Like this was something personal. And I think when you really share a lot of your life online, you feel a sort of pressure to show up, especially like in the type of work I do. But I think that was like one of the biggest things that I kind of was like proud of the most was that I let this be personal for me. And that was hard. It was hard not to just hop on stories and like share something, but then I was like, well, what is the point of me sharing this? And if it was for someone else, I was like, okay, then I just can hold off, because this is my journey. Like I don't have to share every little piece. And then honestly, it was just I did not expect to grieve the way I did. Um, it was very, very, very intense. I have never like experienced emotions like that before. Um, and it was very, very tough. Um, I can't even like get into all of that because I know there's people that listen to this episode and I'm not trying to like be mean, but like I struggled so much because I am someone who is always there for everyone, night or day. Um, a lot of my friends, I'm always there for them. A lot of like people in my life, no matter what, I drop everything to be there for them. And when I was going through this and like now that I'm out of it, I'm like everybody has their shit, right? Everybody's going through things. So like, but when I was going through this, I felt so upset because like I was like, oh my gosh, this person didn't even check on me. Like they barely messaged me. And I've been able to like be on the other side of it now, like now that I'm out of it and be like, listen, Sarah, like everybody has their own stuff going on. Like you can't be so I was very like the word isn't full of myself, but almost like kind of feeling sorry for myself in a way. And add that on top of grief and stuff, it just felt so raw, very raw. But now I am doing okay. I feel so much better. There are days where I still very much so struggle with the fact that struggle with the fact that I'll never conceive on my own, um, ever. Like that's just never going to be an option. So if we do want kids, we will adopt or foster, and we both don't feel like, I mean, as of right now, like we both feel like that's not the right path for us. Um, But at the end of the day, me and my husband are both very happy with the decision I've made, and it's affected, the things that we've been able to do. And life has become a little bit more enjoyable. So I feel like I'm still going to be grieving this for a while. It's something that I don't think you just get over very easily. And when I had my 6-week post-op appointment, even my doctor was like, it takes a while and like be gentle on yourself and give yourself grace. And I was like, I found that to be very refreshing because I was like, yes, you are so right. I don't do enough of that. I very much so struggle with that. So it's definitely something I've been doing a lot of, while also tapping into like nervous system support and really like pouring into myself, being gentle, not overdoing it, still understanding that I am still healing even 11 weeks later. My levels are still like regulating out and things like that. So like as much as it seems like it was so long ago, it really wasn't that long ago. And so still again just being very gentle and kind on myself and speaking to myself with words of love and magic versus why are you like this or like more pointed questions. So that was a really good question. I really appreciate you asking me that. Another question that I got was what did I do for like healing wise? And the biggest thing was I did take my pain meds, but leading up to the surgery, I only had a week to prepare. And if it would have had longer, it would have looked a little bit different. But um, I made sure that I was really, really, really focusing on my diet, making sure I was eating a lot of like fibrous foods, very high in antioxidants, just making sure that I was really keeping my bowels moving, hydrating myself, and then also drinking my mineral mocktails every day. That helps with hydration even more. And that is what I also put in my hospital bag. So, um, I did stay the night over in the hospital, but not, let me go back. So, other things that I would recommend doing is number one, working with a coach one-on-one, before if you do a surgery like this, because they can help you like I should say a health coach. So someone like me, I can help you with like supplementation that you can take beforehand. And then also just kind of like, making sure that you're prepping your body. I tried to move my body the best I could before surgery. And then again, focusing on that hydration, the antioxidants, the fiber, making sure you're having very regular bowel movements before your surgery because your surgery you get a lot of medications, a lot of pain medications that will, um, one of the side effects is constipation from those. And when you are getting a hysterectomy, you do not want to strain on the toilet at all. So you definitely need to make sure that your bowels are moving properly. I never had to take stool softeners or anything like that because I focused on the stuff beforehand, and that kept me moving pretty easily. I don't think I even went long without a bowel movement. Actually, I think I probably pooped like the next day. So those are some big things. After surgery, I made sure that I had a heating pad, ice packs. I had plenty of hydration stuff. I did have mints and peppermint tea that helps with the bloating from surgery. Also ginger. I drink celery juice for inflammation. And then I also had a hysterectomy pillow that you could put an ice pack in and hold it over your abdomen. And that was great of getting like up and down out of bed, off the chair, things like that. I did get a brace, but I never used it, an abdominal brace. Also making sure that like you have some shows that you already know you're wanting to watch. Making sure that you have everything like kind of close by your bed or making sure that your husband knows like where things are. I also used an elevation pillow underneath my head and my feet. I kept my feet elevated too, but keeping my head elevated helped a little bit. So that way I wouldn't have to like lay all the way flat. Rolling side to side is very uncomfortable. I do not recommend it. So I actually like slept like this. I had pillows like all down my side. I had my feet elevated, my head elevated, and then my hysterectomy pillow on top. And that was so comfortable doing it that way. Um, I did take plenty of ibuprofen and Tylenol in between doses of pain medication. The biggest thing for me was like I wanted to stay on top of my pain. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't like overdoing it at all. I wanted to be very gentle, but I still also got up and took walks around the house. And then eventually I want to say like on day 5, I had finally got out of the house. So make sure you take your hysterectomy pillow with you to the hospital because you're going to want to use it like afterwards and all the way home. Um, yeah, let me find the other questions real quick. Okay, so another question was like, how did I get my provider to do the hysterectomy? Because this person's been trying to get a hysterectomy and their provider won't do it. For me, mine was a medical emergency. So like I went in on a Monday and then the next Monday had the hysterectomy. I was bleeding so bad. I had needed several iron transfusions. So it was a little bit different. We actually got insurance to um prior auth it right away and get the ball moving, which was pretty crazy. Um So, I mean, that was like my experience. What I would recommend is first off, reach out to me. Like, let's book a session, let's get you some help. Second of all, I would have very honest conversations about why it is that you are wanting a hysterectomy with your OBGYN. And if they still say no, honestly, go find someone else because at the point of them saying no, you don't want to convince them because this is who you're going to be trusting to do your surgery, right? So like you want to make sure that you are going to have it done by someone who you can trust. Um so that's like kind of my biggest advice is if you have a provider that says no, go find a new one. That's such a red flag to me. Uh yeah, especially if you are someone who is dealing with a lot of issues and can't take birth control or doesn't want to take birth control, right? Like I get that. And you shouldn't have to. You should not have to um be told no, period. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is. Um, yeah. Anyways, I think that's all the questions that I have or that I'm going to answer today. But I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I know this episode was kind of long, kind of all over the place with me recording on TikTok too, but I definitely want to get back to podcasting more and sharing more with you all. That being said, I want to tell you guys about a couple things that have been happening, and I will do that on the next podcast episode. And hopefully I will be a little bit more regular on here showing up. But yeah, anyways, I love you all so much. Um, excuse me. I hope to see you guys soon. Leave a comment below, like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, and yeah, we'll talk again soon.